We are awaiting President Trump and remarks on today's shooting of Republicans who were practicing for a baseball game, a charity baseball game, which is scheduled still, I believe, to take place at Nationals Park in Washington tomorrow night. And the accused gunman is a Democrat and a Bernie Sanders supporter who was wishing death upon Mr. Trump and all Republicans, according to some online posts. And of course, we normally hear in media that the Republicans are scoundrels and ginning up hate-filled attacks on Democrats, but that generally doesn't end up being the case. And I don't, as I've said earlier, I don't believe that we have many leading Democrats on the national level who've yet condemned this. Mr. Sanders himself, who might have some kooky ideas from our standpoint, but seems to be a nice fellow otherwise, I would believe that Mr. Sanders himself will likely have a statement on this today and telling his supporters that they need to dial it down and perhaps stand down completely. But I do give credit that we have Democrats here in Idaho. As I mentioned it earlier, our two leaders, they've both been on the program with us, both Matt Erpelding from our House Democrats in Boise and Michelle Stennett from our House, or the Senate Democrats in Boise. They have issued a statement today saying it's time to really to turn the dial down on this type of heated rhetoric that leads to this sort of thing happening. Representative Steve Scalise, who is a representative in Washington from Louisiana, he was wounded after being apparently shot in one of his hips while he was on the baseball diamond. And we have two of his members of his security detail who were also wounded. Jeff Flake, who's from Arizona, U.S. Senator and formerly a member of the House of Representatives, was describing some of what took place while he was being interviewed at the ballpark following all of this today and talked about the heroism of that security detail.
Was Crystal, was her name, was shot, I think, pretty early, and she went down, and so the other gentleman was returning fire.
So it's a female police officer?
Capitol Police officer. She's wounded. She was taken airlifted.
You heard someone was maybe shot in the head?
No, there was a gentleman by the name of Matt was shot in the chest, and so he was taken over, I think, by ambulance.
Just what do you think?
No idea. But I got Steve Scalise's phone and called his wife. I just didn't want her to wake up and hear the news.
What he says is he picked up Steve Scalise's cell phone, called Scalise's wife to tell her that her husband had been shot. Hopefully, he explained it. Well, here's the president addressing the country.
Who spoke to the shooter. Let's listen now to the president.
As you all know, shortly after 7 a.m. this morning, a gunman opened fire on members of Congress and their staffs as they were practicing for tomorrow's annual charity baseball game. Authorities are continuing to investigate the crime, and the assailant has now died from his injuries. The FBI is leading the investigation and will continue to provide updates as new information becomes available. Congressman Steve Scalise, a member of House leadership, was shot and badly wounded and is now in stable condition at the hospital, along with two very courageous Capitol police officers. At least two others were also wounded. Many lives would have been lost if not for the heroic actions of the two Capitol police officers who took down the gunman despite sustaining gunshot wounds during a very, very brutal assault. Melania and I are grateful for their heroism and praying for the swift recovery of all victims. Congressman Scalise is a friend, and a very good friend. He's a patriot, and he's a fighter. He will recover from this assault And Steve, I want you to know that you have the prayers not only of the entire city behind you, but of an entire nation and, frankly, the entire world. America is praying for you, and America is praying for all of the victims of this terrible shooting. I spoke with Steve's wife, Jennifer, and I pledged to her our full and absolute support, anything she needs. We're with her and with the entire Scalise family. I have also spoken with Chief Matthew Verderosa. He's doing a fantastic job, of the Capitol Police, to express our sympathies for his wounded officers and to express my admiration for their courage. Our brave Capitol Police perform a challenging job with incredible skill, and their sacrifice makes democracy possible. We also commend the brave first responders from Alexandria Police Fire and Rescue who rushed to the scene. Everyone on that field is a public servant. Our courageous police, our congressional aides who work so tirelessly behind the scenes with enormous devotion, and our dedicated members of Congress who represent our people. We may have our differences, but we do well in times like these to remember that everyone who serves in our nation's capital is here because, above all, they love our country. We can all agree that we are blessed to be Americans, that our children deserve to grow up in a nation of safety and peace, and that we are strongest when we are unified and when we work together for the common good. Please take a moment today to cherish those you love, and always remember those who serve and keep us safe. God bless them all. God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you.
President Trump making a brief statement at the White House today following the shooting. Can I briefly tell you that there's a link I just happened to be looking at, and as it turns out, uh, Twitter is a double-edged sword. Sometimes you can get a lot of information out on social media. Other times it is just despicable. And America's leftists are taking to Twitter saying this is karma. That Republicans were shot, and Republican Steve Scalise was shot at a ball field today. Here's one that says, if the shooter has a serious health condition and is taking pot shots at the GOP House leadership, considered self-defense. And again, obviously, you had two people. The president says the shooter, Mr. Hodgkinson, alleged shooter, is dead. He was struck, obviously, by return fire. Two members of the Capitol Police were wounded, but they were able to return fire, and apparently he has now died from the wounds he suffered. They're obviously very accurate when they're doing something like this. They've trained to respond in this type of situation. Apparently, the leftists believe, though, that Capitol Police as well being shot and wounded in this situation, and shots being fired while there are children, for crying out loud on the ball field, that this is okay. There were people walking dogs in a park nearby, a dog park next door. Here's a leftist by the name of Charles Oakley. Well, that KKK bleep deserved it. And just, he calls him a really bad name. Here's a technology writer by the name of Walt is Frozen, I guess is what he calls himself. Maybe if it's Republican politicians being targeted now, today's awful tragedy might have been a silver lining. It boggles the mind if people on our own side were saying these types of things about Democrats being shot, how there would be just a demand that Republicans close up shop and go home for good. 736-0300, the telephone number to reach our program today, 736-0300. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Is it time? And here's a question for you to ponder and maybe answer. is it time for mainstream media, Hollywood, and academia to shut the hell up and stop their whining and start policing themselves? Telephone number to reach the show, 736-0300. We're at 944, and it's 60 on KLIX, and you're up next. You're on the air.
Good morning, Bill. Hey, I had the opportunity to take some young high school students over the weekend on a camping trip, and they disclosed to me a lot of interesting things about what they get at the school over in Buell. There's several teachers that will not allow them to talk about Trump. One of them, if they say anything about Trump, they're automatically shut down. This one particular teacher was a big Sanders supporter, and not to say that they're not sympathizing with people today, but they have these young people in their classroom. They're supposed to be instilling in them the way to think and to think on their own, and it's not happening. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Hey, thank you much for the telephone call. And again, that happens in a rural community, fairly conservative community here in southern Idaho. We need to have, because it's predicted in another decade to decade and a half, that robotics will take over about 90% of all jobs currently performed. And we're teaching kids what in school? We're teaching them Bernie Sanders socialism instead of what they'll need to know to get by. Our next caller joins us. You're on the air on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Welcome aboard.
Yes, I just wanted to say something. I am a liberal, but and I think this is a horrible thing that happened today. It's very tragic.
However, you want to qualify it.
No, I do not. What I want to say, though, is there are idiots, Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter the race, doesn't matter the religion. There are just idiots out there. I wish people would stop separating them and causing this separation between us. I have friends that are Republicans. I have friends that are, different races. But you're saying the media is doing this. Well, you're part of this media.
Does anybody confuse me with the New York Times?
I'm not confusing anybody.
No. When I talk about media, people know what I'm talking about. When you say, "Oh, Bill, you're part of the media," nobody confuses me with the Washington Post or MSDNC or CNN or the New York Times. Thank you for the call. Next caller, you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX. Go ahead.
Yeah, Bill, I don't say this in a with any humorous intent, but I like to throw this out there. Sandernistas. I'll hang up.
And I thank you for the call. I give our liberal caller a nod in that, yes, there are idiots on all sides of politics in this country. I deal with them frequently, obviously, in various social media aspects and on air. There was a fellow yesterday who was complaining about something I posted at a Tea Party page in Idaho Falls. And every time he complains about anything I post, because you can't say anything bad about one of his his choice for governor in Idaho. And even though I don't say anything bad, if I even mention anything nice about one of the opponents in the primary, he's like the loud drunk at the end of the bar. And we don't need those types of idiots around. He's not dangerous, but he's like the loud drunk you've got to deal with in some cases. And sure, but he's not going to go out there, take a rifle and start shooting people down because he doesn't agree with them politically. That was a Democrat today who did that. Let's not excuse it. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story.
Hello, Bill. Hey, earlier today you mentioned what they said about a possible civil war sometime. When that happens, it's going to be difficult for us right-wingers to get engaged in this, because of the rules of engagement are going to be totally different between the left and the right. When the left attacks us, they're not going to care who they kill or how many.
No, they were shooting at a dog park with kids in the background today.
Right. And when the right people, us, when we fight back, the first thing we're going to have to do is make sure that there's no women or children in the building before we blow the building full of before we blow up a building full of lefties. And they're not going to care who they kill.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say.
Thank you. And very evident, this fellow this morning didn't care who was in the background. in a residential neighborhood with children on the field. Children were out there. And people who couldn't defend themselves. As someone pointed out, if these plainclothes police officers hadn't been there, the carnage would have been just undescribable. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX. Go ahead.
See, out here where the rubber meets the road, every day I get up and we all get up and go to work and we fear for, for various things. And when we have this kind of unnecessary things going on because of the rhetoric of the left, these insane SOBs, you see, when people die or get hurt, it still doesn't seem to have any effect on them. As long as it's not them suffering in any way or their family. Sometimes you wonder if they even care about their own family. They would. The cause is all that matters. And what will they be saying today on CNN and MSNBC?
They'll be blaming Trump.
You bet your behind they will. And this is the thing. I wish no bad on people. But you see, when you realize that this type of thing is destroying our country, and we all have to live here, my family, me, my friends, you, and I say, when do you start realizing what is real and what isn't? Thanks, Bill.
Hey, thank you for the telephone call. We have another caller joining us. Caller, you're on the air at 10 minutes away from 10 o'clock on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com.
Hey, I'll make this quick. It's the Democrats that are dividing the country. They're the divider. I do not agree with everything the Republicans do, but it's the Democrats that are dividing the country right now. And going back to the gun, I just watched the news. They were calling this an AR-15 this morning. Guess what? Now they're saying it's an M4. Thanks, Bill.
How would liberal media know what it was? Oh, it had a stock on it and went bang, bang, bang. And we need to take it away from people. Except for Sanders supporters. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX. Good morning. Go ahead.
In response to a liberal caller earlier, I'm sorry, but there's only been one side that's been advocating violence towards their political enemies since the election.
Right.
That's the Antifa in Berkeley, to Kathy Griffin and her grotesque stunt, to the theater company in New York. If you sat by and watched those things and didn't say anything to your liberal friends or your Republican friends and decry that stuff, you are part of the problem. You are absolutely part of the problem. If you want to fight for your beliefs, fine. I'm a 21-year Army veteran. I'll fight for my beliefs, dang right. But if you want to start taking up arms, you better be prepared for the inevitable results.
Yeah, and I thank you for the call. I think that's well said. I wrote a newspaper column yesterday where I referenced that the silent majority, the old silent majority, when it gets up off the couch and decides to fight back, there's going to be heck to pay for the other side. You're up next. You're on the air. Go ahead.
I'll be even shorter than that. No gun zone, low gun state.
Right, Virginia. Thank you for the call. Virginia, and as I mentioned, Terry McAuliffe, unfortunately, one time at one period of my life was a relative by marriage. He is the most self-serving, opportunistic politician I've ever met. Well, save for his buddies in the Clinton family, who he's very, very close to. And I would bet he would sell his own soul for public office, and he may have. This is a guy who was, and again, the good guys who had guns there today kept this from becoming a lot worse. A lot worse. The Capitol police officers who were there. And, if they'd been in uniform, he may have opened fire on them first to try to take them out. But he saw an opportunity to take some of the folks out who were playing out on the field or practicing out on the field and thought he could just sit there and, ping away at whoever he wanted to hit. And he must have been shocked when people started shooting back at him. Took 3 minutes for local police to get there once the first calls came in of the shooting. 3 minutes. Now, is that remarkable? I don't know. If Capitol Police hadn't been there, how many people would this joker have killed in 3 minutes? Think about that. I can pop off a lot of rounds myself with a pistol in a matter of 30 seconds or 10 seconds. And 3 minutes, this guy could have done. There's a picture of him now that's being I see it up on my TV monitor saying tax the rich. And he's standing at some demonstration that's showing him complaining about Ronald Reagan. And, Ronald Reagan's been dead for more than a decade, and the liberals still keep screaming about the fact that he was elected president overwhelmingly, we should point out, by their countrymen twice. But again, they refuse to actually, and for all the folks out there who scream, Hillary got more popular votes. Well, elections are conducted by the rules of the election. So the guy who won, his campaign designed the campaign to win. Now, if it had been a popular vote election, they would have designed the campaign otherwise. That's a lame excuse. It's a lame excuse. This guy says tax the rich like Congress did for 70 years till Reagan's trickled down. They didn't tax the rich. The rich have always found ways around this. 9:55. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Again, I see a Republican congressman speaking from Tennessee on television about this right now. I can tell because he's got his Orange Volunteers hat on. But once more, I have not seen any of the leading Democrats come forward on Capitol Hill, at least at this point, and say, this is wrong. We've got to stop. No, instead they'll blame it on Trump. They'll blame it on Russia. They'll blame it on collusion, Martians or Neptunians or whoever they feel they can blame it on, and continue to get away with all of this. And over at the New York Times and the Washington Post, they'll continue to carry water for all of these guys. You'll see, as I said earlier, you'll see academia and the like come out and start saying, well, he was driven to do this because of, and therefore people who are insane aren't responsible for their actions. You've got people who now say that anybody, insane or sane, who takes a firearm and starts shooting down other people isn't responsible. The whack jobs are just in complete control of the country at the moment. And this is not necessarily even the end game with all of this. As the one veteran said earlier, after 21 years in the military, there are a lot of people who would know how to fight back if they had to. And that's the sad part of it is the leftists out there think they can continually get away with this. But eventually, two people would shoot back, two sets of people. Number one, as they did today, government, law enforcement, that is. Or number two, they're going to anger the rest of the populace. The rest of the populace will not likely go out and just start shooting willy-nilly, but it would defend itself. It would defend itself. That's one thing about a state like Idaho. Jesse Waters said on the 5 a few weeks ago on Fox, he was being badgered by, who was it? Oh, Juan Williams. Williams, who's all in favor of taking your firearms away. Jesse Waters says, we don't have a lot of these problems with shootings in places like Idaho, and everybody's got a gun there. And that's the thing. They know that they can't get away with it somewhere like here, but in these gun-free zones, they know that they can dang well get away with it, which is why they do it. We've got to take a break for the next 22 hours, God willing, and the creek don't rise. They'll allow me to come back tomorrow morning and do this all over on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Rush Limbaugh will have more on this coming up on his program in just a few minutes following Fox News. Sean Hannity as well will have more about the story on his program coming up here on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com between 1 and 4 o'clock today. Glenn Beck after news at 4 o'clock this afternoon, and of course, Dave Ramsey from 7 until 10 o'clock tonight.